Good morning. It is Monday, April the 20th, and this is today's sociology lecture. Our question of the day starts off with, what is the philosophy called that men and women should be politically and economically and socially equal? Organize activities on behalf of this principle. So you'll find that in your book. That's one of your vocab words, so you'll be able to look that up. I'm trying to work out. I know we talked about the Breakfast Club and trying to have some questions answer on it. Some of you may have seen it. I'm trying to work some way out to be able to show that. It's hard because I bought it through Amazon Prime, and it's hard to show that video through YouTube. I can't even send a link out to you and let you watch that. If people could email me and let me know if you have access to some way to be able to watch that. There's only 11 questions that you get asked about the video and how it relates to what we talked about in sociology. So if there's a possibility you can do that, that would be great. If you can view it, let me know, and I'll get those questions put up on the Teams app so you can take care of that, okay? You can watch it, answer the questions, turn it back in, and get your points for watching it, all right? So we were talking about sex and gender, and we're getting ready to start with gender inequality and global perspective, okay? Around the world, gender is the primary division between people. Every society sorts men and women into separate groups and gives them different access to property, power, and prestige. And remember, property, power, and prestige are the three main things that we said that works in stratification. Okay, so this works in gender also. These divisions always favor men as a group. After reviewing historical records, and historian and feminist Gerda Lerner concluded there is not a single society known where women as a group have decision-making power over men. Consequently, sociologists classify females as a minority group because females outnumber males. You may find this strange. The term minority group applies, however, because it refers to people who are discriminated against on the basis of physical or cultural characteristics, regardless of their numbers. Now, how did females become a minority group? Have females been a minority group forever? Some analysts speculate that in hunting and gathering societies, women and men were social equals, and in horticultural societies also had less gender discrimination that is common today. Now, in these societies, women have contributed in about 60% of the group's total food, yet in these societies, but around the world, gender is a basis for discrimination. How then did this happen? When did women become the minority? You got to look at the origins of our society. So the origins of the patriarchy society, the major theory of origin of patriarchy, men-dominated society, points to social consequences of human reproduction. In early human history, life was short. To balance the high death rate and maintain population, women had to give birth to many children. This brought severe consequences for women. To survive, an infant needed a nursing mother with a child at her breast or in her uterus, or one carried on her hip or on her back. Women were physically encumbered. Consequently, around the world, women assumed tasks that were associated with home and childcare, while men took over the hunting and gathering of large animals, and other tasks required both greater speed and longer absences from the base camp. The result for this was that men became dominant. Okay, it was the men who left camp to hunt, who made contact with other tribes, who traded with these groups, who quarreled and waged war with them. It also was the men who made and controlled the instruments of death, weapons that were used for hunting and warfare. It was also they who accumulated possessions in trade and gained prestige by returning to the camp triumphant in victory, leading captured prisoners or bringing large animals they'd killed to feed the tribe. Okay, little prestige is given to the routine, taken for granted activities of women who were not perceived as risking their lives for the group. Eventually, men took over society. Their sources of power were their weapons, items of trade, and knowledge gained from contact with other groups. Women became second-class citizens subject to men's decisions. Now, we've seen this. If you look back in history, um, in the Middle East, women weren't allowed to own property. In Native American tribes, if the husband died and the woman didn't have a son or a brother to go to stay with, she was an outcast. In a lot of those tribes, her possessions were taken away, and she was an outcast. And if she was very old and not suitable to be remarried, then she possibly was left out on her own to probably die. Now, if she was young enough to remarry and possibly could have children for some other man in the tribe, then a lot of times the chief or the leaders would have her be remarried, and she would end up having a family again. Okay, so there wasn't much that women could do. Even think about when our ancestors first started coming across the United States. There were times when husband and wives would take off and start west and have land grants and stuff that were in the husband's name. But when they would get there, if the husband had died, the wife didn't get it. It wasn't hers. Women didn't have the right to own property. Think about the South, even up to the Civil War. Women were supposed to be ornaments on their husband's arms. And I know that might be shocking to hear, but that's the way it was. And so this holds a lot of credit. Now, I will say that we have evidence that, and I believe it was in the Iroquois tribes, that they were matriarchal, okay, which meant that women took leadership roles and made decisions. The men still went out and fought, but the women were the ones who made decisions, okay? So there were some out there, okay? The book was going to want you to believe that there were none, but there were some, okay? It's just something that the book just doesn't really cover very well, okay? Remember, okay, and that says, is this theory correct, is what the book asks. And we need to remember that the answer lies buried in human history, and there's no way of testing it. Male dominance may be the result of some entirely different cause. For example, an anthropologist, Marvin Harris, proposed that because most men are stronger than most women and in survival in the tribe groups required hand-to-hand combat, men became warriors and women became rewarded a reward that enhanced the men to risk their lives in battle. Frederick Ingalls proposed that patriarchy came with the development of private property. He could not explain why private property should have produced male dominance, however. Then there's Gerda Lerner, who suggests that patriarchy may have even had different origins in different places. Whatever its origins, a circular system of thought involved. Men came to think of themselves as inherently superior based upon evidence that they had dominated society. They shouldered many of the activities with secrecy and constructed elaborate rules and rituals. Okay. Now, on page 301, mass media and social life, the women I ran, I'd like for you to read that. Okay. That kind of goes along with this, gives you a little bit of background on this. So if you could read that, that would be great. When we move on in this thing, now, this last sentence that I was talking about, I said they shrouded many of their activities with secrecy and constructed elaborate rules and rituals to avoid contamination by females whom they openly deemed inferior by that time. Now, tribal societies developed into larger groups, and as they did, men who enjoyed power and privilege maintained their dominance. Long after hunting and hand-to-hand combat ceased to be routine, even after large numbers of children were no longer needed to maintain the population, men held on to this power and dominance. In contemporary societies, then, it is a constitution of millennial-old pattern whose origin is lost in history. So it still goes on. I mean, we kind of talked about it a little bit off and on about how women have troubles reaching certain levels in business. We've even talked about administrators in school districts And remember how we discussed how many female administrators are there in Charleston School District? We sat there and thought about, well, there's one at Mark Twain. Okay. There's one at Carl Sandburg. There's one in central office. And if I'm not mistaken, that's all there are. How many total administration positions are there? Well, there's 2 full-time positions at the high school, 2 more at the middle school, 2 more at Jefferson, 1 at Ashmore, 1 at Mark Twain, 2 at Carl Sandburg, and 3 at central office. That's close to 13. So 3 out of the 13 administrative positions are female. Now, why is that? And that's the bigger question that we got to look at. Why is that? Are there just not that many qualified administrative applicants that are female? Or does that go back to what the book's talking about, where the males are more dominant in society? Now, if you look at teachers in the buildings, in a lot of the buildings, it's majority females, okay? But that's not the administrative positions. We talked about how in business world, some females have trouble reaching those high positions. And even when a female reaches a position that's the same as a man, sometimes she's paid less. And that's been part of what's going on. So all this has been building and building forever. Okay. Just because you might be learning about it now, which I think you all probably know this, doesn't mean that it hasn't been going on forever. Okay. So it's been something that's been going on for a long time. Okay. Now, sex typing of work. Anthropologist George Murdoch analyzed the data that researchers had reported on 324 societies around the world. He found that in all of them, activities are sex typed. In other words, every society associates certain activities with one sex or the other. He also found that activities that are considered female in one society may be considered male in another. In some groups, for example, taking care of cattle is a woman's work, while in other groups assign this task to men. Okay? There was one exception, metalworking, which considered men's work in all the societies that Murdoch examined. Making weapons, pursuing sea mammals, hunting were almost universally the dominance of men. But in a few societies, women participated in these activities. Although Murdoch found no specific work that was universally assigned to only women, he did find that making clothing, cooking, carrying water, and grinding grain were almost always female tasks. In a few societies, however, such activities were regarded as men works. So he went out and started looking at jobs that are assigned to men and women. And basically what he found out that there were some jobs in different societies that might be males in one society and would be females in another. And there are just a few exceptions, metalworking and then working out on the seas were usually almost all dominated by men. But then in other societies, even grinding grain could be men or women's job. Okay, so it kind of goes back and forth. All right. Now, from his cross-cultural survey, we conclude that nothing about biology requires men and women to be assigned different work. Anatomy does not have to equal destiny when it comes to occupations. For as we have seen, pursuits that are considered feminine in one society may be deemed masculine in another, or vice versa. Gender and the prestige of work. You might ask whether the division of labor really illustrates social inequality. Does it perhaps simply represent each group's arbitrary ways of dividing up labor? Not gender discrimination. Now, this could be the case, except for this finding. Universally greater prestige is given to male activities, regardless of what those activities are. Now, what do you think about that? What that's saying is that if taking care of cattle is a male's job in this society over here, but taking care of cattle is a women's job in this society over here, when it's a man's job, it's more prestigious. So whatever the men are doing in the society where the women are taking care of the cattle, the men's job is more prestigious. So women can be doing the same job in this society as the men in this society, but the men over here are going to get more prestige for doing it than what the women will over here. If that makes sense. If men were all the teachers, when a woman came in to teach, the man would still get more prestige for being the teacher than the woman. Okay, now that's not the way it is here, but that's just another example that I can use to try to bring that across. Okay, it's just kind of strange how that works. All right. If taking care of goats is men's work, then taking care of goats is considered important and it carries high prestige. But if it is women's work, it is considered less important and is given less prestige. When delivering babies is women's work and it is done by midwives, it was given low prestige. But when men took over this task, they became baby doctors with high prestige. In short, it is not the work that proves the prestige, but the sex with which the work is associated with. Okay, I think everybody understands that. All right. Other areas of global discrimination. Got just a little bit farther. Yep, we'll finish up with this. Okay, the global gap in education. Almost 1 billion adults around the world cannot read. 2/3 are women. Literacy is especially common. Illiteracy, especially common in Africa and the Middle East, but is not limited to those areas. In North America, only about half of the women in Haiti can read and write. The United Nations has made a priority to increase literacy and monitors each country's progress. The statistics in the United Nations uses, though, underestimate the problem. Some people are counted as literate if they can write their name. Okay. The global gap in politics. In 2008, Rwanda became the first country in the world to elect more women, which is 56%, than men to national legislature. It is typical for women to be highly underrepresented in politics. For on average, women make up about 18% of the world's national legislative bodies. In some countries, such as Papua New Guinea, the total is only 1%. Okay, so there's a big gap in politics. Okay, gap in pay, and we've talked about this before, and everybody knows this. In every nation, women average less pay than men. In the United States, full-time working women average 70% of what men make. Okay, in some countries, women make as much as half than that. Okay, now we also talked about this too. In teaching in school, everybody starts off at the same pay. Okay, everybody gets the same bumps in raises all the time. So that's one area that I know of that men and women are paid the same. Okay, so that might be one of the few places. All right, just throw that out again. Global violence against women. As global human rights issue, as a global human rights issue is violence against women. Now, historical examples are foot binding in China, witch burning in Europe, sute, which burning the living widow of the body of her dead husband. So they took a living widow and they burned her with her dead husband. Okay. In India, today we have rape, wife beating, female kidnapping of women into to be brides. These are also forced prostitution, which could be probably was the case in our opening vinaigrette. Another notorious example is female circumcision. The topic of cultural diversity box on page 306. Honor killings are another form of violence against women. In some societies, such as Pakistan, Jordan, and Kurdistan, a woman who is thought to have brought disgrace to her family is killed by the male relative, usually a brother or husband, but sometimes her father or uncles. What threat to the family's honor can be so severe that men kill a daughter, wife, or sister? The usual reason is sex outside the marriage. Even a woman who has been raped is in danger of becoming the victim of an honor killing. Killing the girl or woman removes a stain she has brought to the family and restores its honor in the community. Sharing this view, the police in these countries generally ignore those killings, viewing them as private family matters. Okay. a lot there to soak in. I would like for you to read on page 304 and 305, Work and Gender, Women at Work in India, and then the cultural diversity on page 306. And we'll start back up tomorrow on page 307 with gender inequality in the United States and kind of go from there. I hope you guys are all being safe. I hope you guys continue to do your work. I will let you know that seniors don't have any incompletes on your grade. Check your Skyward. If you got incompletes, contact those teachers and see what you can do to get that made up. You don't want any incompletes going in these next couple of weeks. Graduation day is still the same day it was supposed to be. So your last day of classes are the same days they were supposed to be. You are so close. You don't want to mess things up by having incompletes. If I have you down for an incomplete on Skyward, get a hold of me. Email me. Call my school number, 217-639-5099. Find out what you need to do. See what we can do to get you so you do not have incompletes. You're almost there. I know it's not the way you wanted it to be, and you're not going to be in the classroom anymore, but don't mess this up because you get distracted because you have free time and go out and do a bunch of work and stuff, okay? Hang in there. Stay the course. And let's finish these last couple of weeks strong with no incompletes so that you graduate. And then however they figure out graduation, that you'll be good to go. Okay. Stay safe, and I'll be back on here tomorrow.